Howdy campers, we're in Bridgeport, California, and I thought I would just make some notes about road operations. Equipment and safety procedures will come at a later date, but just navigating this boat down the road requires some training if you're uninitiated to Class A vehicles, diesel pushers, and basically driving a bus. That's what it is. And a couple things initially come to mind. One is I've always served myself very well by having a baseline position, a slot in the highway, if you will. Because, you know, since there's 7 feet of bus off the center of my wheel, it's much more mathematically sound to lock in on the left side or the driver's side and use that as home base, like home base on a keyboard. And why that is important is simply because there will be times when you're needing to thread the needle, if you will, between a barricade and a line and oncoming traffic and things like that. So what I do is, if you could see my left foot, is I keep my left foot adjacent to that wall. And this is part of my mathematic baseline of how to do it. Because if you run the math, my left side of my foot is really only like 9 inches or something from the side or outside tire, if that. So you'll find when you're driving the bus, you'll take reference points on the dash and things like that. But again, since my left foot is kind of a guide to the center, you know, double yellow, I find approaching the bus position in the lane mathematically like that makes me far more comfortable when I've again got some tight little roadway and I know the extent of how far left I can go. Now, when you start driving, you'll be able to cross-reference your own foot, and also by using the side view mirror. And your left foot as a guide, again, wedged up against the wall on that side, will show you where your particular, you know, seat position and height above the dash and all those variables that are different with each driver. But what you want to do is, on the open road, really flesh out this mathematical position between the outside of your left foot and the double lane. So, for instance, you can see by my side view mirror here where I am relative to the line. Again, my foot only feels like I'm 1 foot away from the yellow line. So keep that in mind when you start testing this on your own ergonomics for your own body. Again, a baseline for yourself and the mathematics of the width of your bus relative to the width of the highway or an encroached you know, barrier that sometimes highway, you know, when they're expanding highway, they'll sometimes put a tight little cement barrier in there, and you really got to be, you know, running a tight ship on every moment of steering. God forbid it's blowing hard and other components to it. But again, that's a really important one for me, to know with complete comfort where I am relative to that yellow line, meaning how much I have to spare. Obviously, when you're programming your own brain from your left foot to the inside of the yellow line, you'll be able to cross-reference the right side view mirror and how much space you have available. When you're cruising down the road, obviously you don't need to be that anal, but you should find what home base is for you relative to the double yellow line. This is an important safety tip that I think is really worthy of you spending the time and effort on the open road to really dial in your seat position, the height of your head, the outside left side of your foot, relative again to the side view mirror. Again, it'll blow your mind how close your left foot seems to that yellow line while you're driving. So again, and you can cross over here with the side view mirror. So make that a game to figure out how where your home base of mathematics inside a lane is. The other really important and relevant thing on steering is to utilize your armrests. A friend of mine who had an RV, and when I first got into mine, he said, you know, one of the most important things you need to know about driving an RV is use your elbow rests, or armrests, if you will. Both of my elbows are propped there on the armrests. This is really important. The reason being, if you weren't using those, you'd be driving, essentially steering with your shoulder joints. And that is far less accurate than using your fingers and your wrists to steer, especially on a windy day and things like that. Now, obviously, if you're going slow in a parking lot, this doesn't apply. This little lesson here about the armrests really applies to what I'm doing right now, which is open road driving. And sometimes if you're pulling a 3 to 6 hour day, which you have to determine for yourself what the safety margin is for that, and that is variable due to wind and rain and ice and all those things. Sometimes an hour and a half is fatiguing if there's a lot of hazards, a lot of traffic, a lot of road work, a lot of rain, a lot of hail, a lot of snow. You know, you can get fatigued pretty fast because this is a lot of vehicle going down the road. So again, the armrests allow a much less a much more precise way to navigate the bus on straight roads like this. Again, if in a parking lot or navigating turns and stuff, I navigate turns with my wrists and my fingers too, but obviously some road conditions make it important to just lift your, you know, with you're really turning the vehicle, you're likely not going to need your armrests to do it. I am now going up a hill. I'll soon be going less than 50 on a 65 mile per hour interstate highway, and that will require me to turn on my flashers, just so people coming up behind me know I'm a slow vehicle. I've got to get that phone. The operations of the bus, and again back to the fatigue thing a little bit, many places in the country, the beautiful country we live in North America in general, has a lot of places where weather is pretty extreme, and I'm finding, you know, on most of my journeys that wind is a real factor for the bus. Why is it a factor for the bus? One of the reasons is a double-edged sword with the airbag system that we're riding on. Very comfortable, and you know, it feels like you're driving your couch most days, and that is a really cool, you know, gentle vibe. However, because you're riding on pillows, when you get a side wind, you really feel it. So it wouldn't be like that if we were just using, you know, coil springs or leaf springs, but because this is kind of like an air ride, you can even feel people passing you, you know, a car passing you. So that is something that you're going to have to factor into the fatigue when you get used to it. You know, you may want to you know, until you have great experience, you know, I wouldn't try anything over 30 miles that are forecast for that day. 30 miles an hour of gusting winds. Once you have a little more experience and know how to drive in wind, then you might allow yourself a little more gust forecast. However, again, you'll need more stops because of the fatigue factor involved, because you'll be doing 1,000% more steering just to keep it, you know, safely going straight down the road. So it's a double-edged sword again. With this nice comfortable ride in wind is a little sketchy, again, because of the air ride and the fatigue factor of having to, you know, be on the steering, be on top of the steering. We're essentially in the Eastern Sierra, which obviously you could describe as mountain driving. So with that in mind, with a 17-ton bus underneath you, you really have to be conscious of your speed, which can get up really, really fast. Here we're going 60 miles an hour. I should probably have downshifted into 5th already, and if it becomes a really steep grade, go down into 4th and lower your speed, because you want to take advantage of the transmission slowing you down. It's a great transmission, but one thing, a special note that you should put into your logbook or notebook, is it's easy to forget that you've downshifted, and then you start out on the level highway again, and you go, well, why isn't the performance the same? Well, you probably still got it in 4th or 5th gear, and you've just forgotten about it because you were on a long downhill grade. So once you start using the Allison push button transmission here, you got to be thinking that you got to be, you know, really using it. You can't just set it and forget it. Again, in the mountains, you're going to be using it proactively. Now, say you're on the Mammoth Scenic Loop. There's no reason to set it for 6 speeds. I set it at 4 speeds, and then on the very steep part, I'll hit the brakes, go real slow, and put it into 3rd. That way, I can just maintain a slow speed down the hill, and then every once in a while hit the brakes. So right now, we're in 6th because it's a safe highway speed. Well, actually, I'm almost doing 70, and I'm posted at 55, and that's another kind of warning about this vehicle, is you can quickly find yourself at 80 miles an hour because it's such a soft ride, and it's a great system. So I'm downshifting now to 4th gear because we have a pretty good descent going on. So right now I'm going 59 miles an hour. I'm at 3,000 RPMs, and you can see the temperature and the amps and the coolant and a few other things. Now, if I get going much more than 65 in 4th, it's gonna, once it gets to a certain RPM, it's gonna say, I don't like this, you're burning me up, and it will shift on its own. I'm gonna go to 5th again. So now I've upshifted to 5th gear. And again, it's not a very steep grade, but again, when you're in the mountains like this, it's one thing if you're going across country on a plane, but if you're doing, you know, the Canadian Rockies or the Sierra Nevada or any range, you're going to have to be proactive with the gearbox. And then again, once you start using it, you got to remember you're using it, because again, I've forgotten before and just wondering, why isn't my performance the same? Well, the bus wouldn't get out of what I set the transmission at. This LED on the left is where it's actually what has been selected by the driver with those arrows on the bottom right. So a note about, well, let me finish that thought. So it's just time and experience with that. On driving in the mountains, and in general, especially for the first year of you driving, there's the Feather White River. Anyway, really, you don't want to exceed posted signs. Those yellow cautionary signs on a highway like this, when it, you really want to use that as your biblical maximum speed. Now, with modern cars, we all know that we can almost do double those speeds in a car, because if you got a nice modern car, they're really well engineered. Well, with an RV, you don't have the same physics that you have with a car. So again, your safety and your passenger's safety really relies on you observing all posted speed. And again, it's quick that this thing can get away from you. So I'm actually in a passing lane, so I'm going to slow down so some of the cars that have built up, a few cars that have built up behind me, can get by me. In California, if you have 5 or more behind you, you're obligated to stop. Here's an important flashing light for you. never stop on an uphill. If you choose to get out of people's way, wait until you've crested a hill, so when you get back on the highway, you can do so safely by getting up to speed quickly. So that's a really important thing to note. If you're going to stop for whatever reason, lunch or letting people by, make sure you've crested and have a downhill to your advantage to get up to highway speeds quicker. If you did it on the fronts, if you stopped on an uphill, you know, chances are you'll enter the highway at 10-15 miles an hour, and it'll take you 5 minutes to get up to 40 miles an hour. Not 5 minutes, but it'll take you very long to get up to speed. So again, put that in your notebook when doing a stop for a picnic or letting people by. Make sure the vehicle's got some downhill, plenty of view behind you to see the highway, and then a downhill from a crest, or just make sure you stop on the downhill so you can, again, reach highway speeds quickly. You'll note some of the instrumentation here. This top, over on this side panel at 40 degrees to the driver, you've got your trans temperature for the Allison. You also got the pressure of the system. And if you see that green line, that's reading it. The other static line next to it tells you when it's basically nominal operational pressure. Now, some of you may know, so much of a diesel and truck relies on that pressure before you can even move. It's air brakes that stop this thing. It's also, if you don't have any pressure in the system, your accelerator won't work either. So every time you start the vehicle, it's a good 5 minutes, depending on the last time you stopped. If it's been stored a little while, at least 5 minutes to get full pressure up on the bus. And I always wait for the pressure relief valve to go to tell me that it's a full thing. You could probably you know, use it before then. Again, this is a 35-mile-an-hour turn. I'm going to go 35 miles an hour. Again, the physics of these vehicles is just so different than a car. So make those cautionary highway, the caution signs, make them your buddy and your friend. I'm now up to 40, and I'm sure the next turn is going to probably say 35. As you can see, we have a beautiful river. Again, I think it's the White River. But here's our 40, and I'm going 42 right now. So, and you can comfortably go. You don't have to stay on the brakes, because you know that 40, after 25,000 miles of highway, that posted sign, feel free to not hit the brakes additionally. 40, go 40. You don't, you know, the engineers who do these highways figured a really good speed for that. I assume it's for trucks and not Maseratis or Lamborghinis. So as soon as we're through this gorge, we'll be seeing the plane, the Carson City plane, heading into Nevada. But before then, we'll be going by Topaz Lake, which is a beautiful gem in the Sierra. So anyway, depending on how many people are behind me, I will likely, I actually drive myself, being a very experienced driver, I'm often going faster than cars. However, you know, I am a conscientious driver, and if there's somebody that, you know, a couple of people that I'm slowing down, I will certainly. But if you look behind me, there's not a lot of cars stacked up behind me. So here's a 50, I'm going 65, so I'm going to pump on the brakes. Not pump them, but I'm going to get down to that 50 and then not stress about the speed I'm going, because I find that those numbers are very safe. This third monitor, if you will, the third dial there, is relates to the turbo pressure on the turbocharger. We have extensive manuals on board, so you can, if interested. I don't really monitor that at all. Whether that's the original system or a upcoming upgrade to a Banks upgrade to get some more performance out of the Cummins diesel, I'm not sure, but if it's up on the dash, it's relevant. If you don't see any cautionary signs, just go ahead and do the speed limit. Again, I'm doing 70 or 69, which is, again, easy to do. But you can see there's a posted 45 mile an hour turn, so I'm going to try to get it down to 50 before I hit that turn. Actually going 51. So, you know, as you can tell, there's a, you know, plus there's a little wiggle room of 5 to 10 miles an hour, and you will determine that based upon how much water, fuel, human beings that you have inside the vehicle. So it's really good to take this stuff really seriously, because not only do you have you and your passengers and your own life to consider, but everyone outside the vehicle. So you got to take this as seriously as you would take, you know, sailing on San Francisco Bay. You can't. Don't ever let your guard down, ever. You'll want to reach over and grab something on the dashboard or something like that. And God, never text. There's just way too much going on with the physics of this, stopping, steering, monitoring your systems. It's just something I can't emphasize enough, how important your role is as skipper to make sure your equipment and the world around you, their safety. So this is your control for the driver of AC and vent, and the temperature of your heat and AC, whether it's the floor or the defroster, or the speed of the fan delivering that air to you. Over here we have passenger side and driver side fans that are controlled by these top two buttons here. There's two places on the toggle for each. There's a fast and a slow speed, and those, despite there being a bulkhead between that fan and your face, it actually comes up and over that radius pretty well. So I use those a lot. I also open this. This is if I have it opened all the way and the screen is making sound, I push the screen open too, so I don't have a side whistle in my head. So again, I will open it all the way, and then the screen opens as well, and it gets rid of the screen, you know, sound. Most people, you know, it's not a bother. It's just, you know, one less piece of data that your brain has to crunch with a lot of things going on when you're driving something like this. You might notice when we go by these semis, the airbag thing I'm talking about, you can see that we got his bow wave of air pushed us, you know, gave the RV a little jiggle, because again, we are riding on airbags and not springs. So it just takes a little bit of getting used to that way. Additional items on the dash. This is your backup camera. That way you can be very precise on how far you back up adjacent to a wall or a fence or something. It doesn't really give you a lot like a car does. It doesn't give you that flatter thing, but I'm looking to upgrade, so I might go to 2 cameras, one to fulfill what it's doing now, and then another one to mimic today's more modern cameras that allow you to actually see behind you in a very big arc. So stay tuned for that. I would imagine the monitor will accommodate both cameras of today's modern cameras. So anyway, being that this is such a well-built system, the entire thing from Monaco, it's like a Hinckley sailboat. It was really well designed, really tough. The engine will go 1 million miles before you need a rebuild. So this is more of a legacy thing, and because its resale isn't great, because it doesn't have side outs, which is, I understand how people like that, but personally I'd rather get the extent, use this to the extent of its lifespan, rather than, you know, even if I won the lottery, I'd probably still keep this thing. Another component that is that serves you to learn really quickly, and to figure out this and how it because you can't hear the words, you have to understand it. So disregard my words, but understand the physics for yourself. So, but here's the lesson. We're actually sitting in front of the front tires right now. And why is that important? That means that the bus's center of effort is way further back than you think it is. And this is a really helpful understanding once you grok it, once it's part of your thing, because then you don't start turning like you would a car. A car's front wheels is way out in front of you, but this bus, your front wheels are behind you. So what does that typically mean in an intersection? Well, that means that you're going much further out into that intersection before you start turning. So it's a good idea while you're turning in the beginning to really visualize those front tires and when things are going to start really moving that way. So again, I can tell you about this, but you have to have your mind's eye understand it. Also, on one of those situations when you're into a limited intersection, often you can get much closer to that island restriction because your front of your bus will pass over on top of that. Obviously, that doesn't work. That only works in situations where there's a low island that we're talking about in some parking lots and stuff like that. But on those parking lot situations where there are low islands, because your tires are much further behind you than you think, you're not gonna hit that island. You can just have the bottom of your bus pass over the top of that island. So that's another thing to factor in a limited space situation. So again, what it looks like is you really have to turn much later than you think when you're entering an intersection. And just know, this thing turns really well. You know, for 32 feet long, the steering radius, I've done U-turns on a highway not much wider than this. So obviously you have to experiment with that, but literally almost did a U-turn on the width of this highway. Actually, it had much, the shoulders were bigger than what you see here, but you'll be amazed at the maneuverability of this thing. It's just, you need to know what the center of effort is. This is Topaz Lake. Part of it is in Nevada, part of it is in California, I believe.